Good morning, Wolfpack. Thank you for joining Nevada Money Mentors this morning for our presentation on love and money. This presentation, just as a heads up, is being recorded and will be available on our Nevada Money Mentors YouTube channel, which we invite you to visit anytime. My name is Amy Nelson, and I'm the Financial Wellness Coordinator for the Nevada Money Mentors program. And today I am joined by our peer mentors and your fellow students, Devin Cooley and Dalia Bangpanya, who will share some important tips in talking to your loved ones about money. And working behind the scenes, and you'll see her probably on our chat today, is another fabulous student. Her name is Dalia Jones, and she will be helping kind of keep us moving along today. So, love is complex enough, right? But then you add money into the mix and it gets even more complicated. They say that love is the best feeling in the whole world, but they also say that money makes the world go round. So when love and money gets too chaotic sometimes, it can create a recipe for disaster. However, setting some ground rules, understanding and having some solid communication can help you move closer to those financial goals that you set for yourself. And keep in mind that talking about money is not isolated to just communicating with your significant others. Our conversations today can help you in chatting about money with family members, such as your parents, siblings, and any loved ones in your life. So without further ado, roses are red, violets are blue. We can't wait to share these money tips with you. So let's think about your loved ones. And in the chat box, if you can share with us, how do you handle money in your relationships? So I'm curious, how do you talk about money? Maybe if you're in a relationship right now, who pays for what? Does money bring up emotions? Are you feeling kind of stressed? Do you feel joy or excitement, sadness? Which person in your relationship maybe brings it up more? Maybe they stress about it more. And how do you handle those money conversations? We want to hear from you and a little bit about how your relationships are and your conversations are with money. And we jokingly and lovingly and endearingly say in our family that I miss money. We joke about that on campus too, that I'm referred to as Miss Money. So as you can imagine, in our household, I'm the money manager. I pay all of the bills, look at the credit cards, handle savings. But it's important that I communicate everything I'm doing back to the family. So feel free if you'd like to share some. And I know Devin and Dalia, you are currently in some relationships and have really close relationships with your families, right? And so I'd love to hear from you too. Nielsen Guy says 50-50. Okay, so half and half. You got both working on some things. And that's a good combination too. Takes less stress off of one particular person. And that could be, confusing too, I think, when you look at just banking and how you have your banking set up when you're in a long-term relationship or you eventually get married, right? You might have joint accounts, you might have sole accounts where you're the only signer on that particular account. And so that communication is definitely key.
Yeah, Amy, if I could just answer real quickly. So, hi everyone, I'm Dalia. I'll be speaking a little bit later today. But at least for me in my relationship, I feel like I'm kind of figuring things out financially still. We're both very independent right now. We both have our own bank accounts. We both make a lot of independent purchases. Every now and then, like for date night, maybe I'll pay for dinner, he'll pay for dinner. But for the most part, it's pretty independent. And we're just starting to figure out how do we combine things or what should we combine going forward. We made our first joint email address so that we can get shared information in the future, like on leases or things like that. So, I'm just kind of figuring it out right now. And I don't know if Devin wanted to chime in and say something real quick too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just good to hear too. Sorry, Devin, I didn't mean to cut you
sure.
off, but it's just good to hear that you're communicating about it. And even the baby steps of setting up that email together is just a great way, again, to set that foundation for you too. But go ahead, Devin.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to talk a little bit more about, our relationships later on when we get further into the presentation. But I think the way that me and my girlfriend have handled our finances has really adapted throughout time. And, whoever has different jobs or whoever has different liabilities, because while we, have our life together, we also have our own lives. And so we have to respect that too. But learn how to handle our money with both of those things happening.
Right, right. Yeah, that's great. And there was a couple comments in here too. It looks like Alexis says that her significant other is buying the food when they go out, but they're doing necessities on their own. And that's a typical plan for, I think, a college student. You're covering your basic needs and essentials, your rent, your utilities and food on your own. But anytime you have more of the discretionary spending, such as entertainment, then you might take turns paying for those things. And Dahlia says that they go over monthly budgets together to help plan for bills. So that's incredible that you already have an established plan. So I think, Devin, you're going to take it from here.
Yep. I'm going to go right along. And like Amy mentioned before, and I'm sure a lot of you assumed, money can play a big role in a relationship, whether it's good or bad. But we definitely see a lot of conflict areas when it comes to money in a relationship. And so without just believing in these kind of notations, let's get into some empirical evidence on why that might be. So this is the study For Richer, For Poorer, Money as a Topic of Marital Conflict in a Home. And this experiment had the purpose to test the frequency, duration, reoccurrence, and impact of money-related issues on a couple. And what they did is they took a sample of 100 husbands and 100 wives between the ages of 25 and 50 years old, making anywhere from $10,000 to $80,000 a year. And the real experiment here is that they told each of these 100 wives and 100 husbands to write down in a diary each conflict instance that they had over the study timeline, which is about 30 days broken up between a 2-hour meeting with the researcher. And they actually recorded 748 total conflict areas in the relationship within that time in those diary entries. And the results are very interesting. Okay, so money was only involved in about 18.3% and 19.4% respectively of the topics. So you can notice that it wasn't the main thing being brought up in all these conflicts, right? So as far as frequency goes, they weren't the most frequent, but there was a whole slew of other things that made money more impactful as a conflict area. So money problems were more likely to go unresolved compared to non-money problems. And it was even cited that the wives in this relationship or in these relationships usually spent more time on the problems, but to no avail, they didn't really solve the problem. And then next, both husbands and wives reported more depressive behaviors in their spouse in conflicts that related to money. Now, this really has to do with the emotional impact that money might have, where if you don't have enough or there might be a problem with who's spending it, it could lead to some really emotional draws that come out of that. And then lastly, money problems were reported as more impactful and long-term than non-money conflicts. And this could be to the point that the wives tried even harder to solve the problem, but they usually went unresolved. So they led to another conflict in the future. And another thing is that there's third parties that are to do with this money, right? They have different liabilities to different people. They have different incomes, and it's really up to their employer if they're going to get a raise or not, or a bonus, or what have you. Now, that obviously all that information is very interesting, right? But we have an extension to that research, and it comes in the form of a survey called The State of Finances in the American Household. Okay. And this was a study led by Dave Ramsey, who, if some of you don't know, he is a radio show personality. He's an author. He does a lot of stuff in the finance world. And what he really does is, or what he did in this survey is led by his company, Ramsey Solutions. He headed a study of 1,000 American adults in 2017 to gauge the money impacts in a relationship. And so the results are also very interesting, right? Nearly 2/3 of all marriages start off in debt, which is very topical, considering that we're all in college, right? The place where a lot of Americans collect debt, as well as, car loans is another common one. And then 94% of respondents who say they have a great marriage discusses their money dreams with their spouse. And this is something we're going to touch on later because it's one big important thing that obviously it shows 94% of respondents say they have a great marriage, and it could be due to that. And then lastly, 63% of those with $50,000 or more in debt feel anxious about talking about their personal finances. And this just shows, especially that emotional impact, the anxiety that's get caused by when you're underwater from, let's say, any debts. And this is another thing that's going to get brought up because debts, I'm sure a lot of you know, very synonymous with kind of a dark meaning. And hopefully we get to show you how to resolve that, at least in a relationship. And that could lead us to the 5 tips to manage finances in a relationship, right? And for one, like we talked about before, I'm in a relationship, and we haven't always been eye to eye on financial topics, but it's definitely a work in progress. And I think some of these tips definitely helped us get to where we are now, which is a good place, I would say.
For sure. So I think I'll pick up right where Devin left off. And I do just want to say that these 5 tips that we're going to share with you today are super helpful, but they're not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution. They're going to be helpful, but you might find that some tips resonate with you more than other tips. And I also want to note that many of these tips are tailored towards romantic relationships, but you could definitely use some of these in a non-romantic relationship, especially if it's with someone that you share a big financial responsibility or goal with, such as like a family member or a roommate, for example. So with that said, we will move into our first tip of the day. And like Devin brought up, it's about debt. How do you talk about debt in your relationship? How do you manage this? So even though it is kind of like a dark topic or it can be really uncomfortable to talk about, you really should talk about it and communicate about your debt. It's important to communicate all past debts that you have. For example, a lot of us may be students and you may be incurring student loan debt. It's important to talk about that if you're going to be in a long-term relationship. And also talk about any future debts you may have. Do you want to have a new car, a house, those kinds of things? And Devin will talk about those too in the next few slides. Next, once you've talked about all past and future debts, create a plan on how to manage that debt. There's a lot of really helpful resources out there. One being Nevada Money Mentors. If you don't already know, one of our biggest resources is financial coaching, where you can actually sign up for a free coaching session, whether you're in a relationship or not, and talk about debt management plans. We've seen a lot of success with these 2 methods called the snowball method or the avalanche method. They're both methods on how to approach debt and get a handle on it. And if you haven't heard about these before, I definitely encourage you to look into it and possibly apply it to your own life. Then, once you've talked about your debts, you've created a plan with your partner or, with Nevada Money Mentors, really encourage yourself or your partner to stay consistent on paying off these debts. What is the point of talking about all of this, creating a plan, if you're not going to actually pay off those debts so that you're able to work towards other goals? So a really quick story. There's a couple I know. Let's just say there's partner 1 and partner 2. Partner 1 has about $50,000 in student loan debt, which might seem like a lot. And partner 2 is completely opposite. They have no debt, they're a homeowner. And partner 1 did feel quite guilty, a lot of negative emotions about bringing this debt into their relationship. But what's important is that they sat down, they talked about it, they talked it out, and they came to the conclusion that they're on the same page and their priority is to pay off partner 1's debt. So partner 2 went out, sold their home, and actually used the earnings to pay down partner 1's debt. So I'm not saying that this is what you have to do in your life at all, if this is your situation, but what matters from the story is that they were on the same page. And even though it might not have been easy the whole time, they had to make sacrifices, all of that. they were able to work together and they're happy with where they are. So that's my story about, I wanted to share with you guys about the debt management and all of that in a relationship.
Yeah. So just like Dolly was mentioning, knowing each other's debts and maybe future debts, it's important to know each other's limits, and that comes with their incomes and their different liabilities that they might have to pay for. And knowing limits is all about understanding the limitation of someone else's finances. So you and your partner aren't going to have the same income all the time, and it's rare that that is actually a thing. Some person might be making more, some person might be making a lot less, but either way, you have to know and understand what those mean for each other. And it's not black and white, right? It's not the person with less money kind of mooching off the person with more money in these dates, or kind of draining them of their income. It might be the person with the higher income is taking the person with the lower income out on dates and expecting them to pay for these high class type of dinners that isn't really in their pay grade. And both of those things leave the other person in uncomfortable positions. So you never want to be the person instigating that, or obviously being the recipient of that. And now, this next point could work in a couple different ways. So letting the partner with the lower income make more financial decisions. Now, like I mentioned before, if the person with the lower income is mooching off the person with the higher income, that's not the best thing. But if the person's able to understand the limitations and kind of make purchases off of their pay range and kind of match that with yours, it might be a lot better, because obviously the person with the more income has a lot less stress when it comes to finances than the person with lower income, because they're a lot less likely to run out of the money. And another addition is, don't let spending or making money be synonymous with effort. There is so much more in a relationship than making money or spending money on gifts, or taking your partner on a special date or something like that. Uh, and I actually have felt this way in my relationship a couple times, and it just goes to show how hard balancing this might be. In the beginning of my own relationship, I made a lot less money and had more liabilities than my partner, and so I ended up getting very comfortable having her pay for things, or kind of not having the expectation to pay for things because she knew what position I was in. uh, and that wasn't the most healthy thing for either of us. And now it's kind of on the flip side, where she's making less money than me and I'm making more money than her, and we're kind of having to compensate for the passive of our relationship. But it's good to know that someone's there for you when you need them, but you just don't want to be too comfortable in taking that money from them, right? And it goes both ways. Now, just like knowing each other's limits is important, it's really good to understand each other's personality when it comes to money, right, Dahlia?
Yes, for sure. So, kind of on that note, that leads us into our third tip of the day, which is about your personality, or specifically your money personality. So, who you are as a person can have a really big impact on the decisions you make financially. Some things you can do to understand your own money personality or your partner's money personality is to analyze your regular spending and saving habits. Asking yourself questions too, like, are you more of a saver or are you more of a spender? And also, is your personality similar or different to your partner's? So, having these conversations in your relationship are important so you're able to settle and understand any differences you may have with your partner ahead of time. It's so much better to be open and have this discussion early on before it could cause any, let's just say, like future debacles. And lastly, once you've taken the time to understand each other's money personalities, it's important to be realistic with each other's habits. So, for example, let's just say that you are more of a saver. You like to save money, you would rather stay in than go out. And your partner could be more of a spender. They're adventurous, they want to go out and do things all the time, which requires money. And that is okay. You can totally have different money personalities in a relationship and make it work. But you really do have to sit down, talk about your differences, and how are you going to make it work? How are you going to compromise, maybe? As a saver, maybe you would like your spending partner to save more money. But it's important to start small and be patient with them and work on it together instead of this, possibly being a whole ordeal in the future. So just be patient, work together, make sure you're on the same page. So that's what I have to say about your money personality.
And I think it'd be interesting to hear what some of you on the line, what are your money personalities? So if you had to kind of lump them up and say, are you a saver? Are you a spender? Are you a giver? Or do you like to donate? What are some words that kind of pop into your head about the type of money personality that you have? And there is, if you're curious more about this, there are some quizzes online that you can take, and I just included the NerdWallet link in the chat box. They have sort of lumped up a couple of different options for you. Their categories include money worship, money avoidance, money vigilance, and money status. And you just answer 8 quick questions, and it will give you your scores in each of the categories. And I know for me, I scored highest in money vigilance, which means I can be a little bit more frugal, and savings is really important to me, but I also do like to spend money every now and then on myself and on my family members and things like that. And looking at relationships that I have outside of my marriage and my family, I have my mother comes to visit a lot, and I notice that she triggers me sometimes to want to spend more money while she's visiting. And I thought that was really interesting and helped me sort of evaluate and reflect personally on how I am with my money. So it was also fun because within our team, Devin and Dahlia also took the quiz to see where they scored highest. And some of us were a little shocked to see what the responses were from the quiz. So I don't know if Devin, you want to share real quick, what was one of your highest rated in the NerdWallet quiz, and feel free to chime in the chat box and share with us some money personalities. And they don't have to be specific to the NerdWallet quiz. Just give us an understanding of where you're coming from.
Yeah, well, my results for the NerdWallet quiz was money worshiper, which has to do with thinking money is, the best thing ever. And it says you're more likely to get in credit card debt or just debt in general, which I feel personally is an attack on me. I don't think that's true. But maybe they know something that I don't. I don't know. Either way, it was fun to see what it is and talk about it with other people.
Yeah, it is really fun to see. And like Dahlia was saying too, in her relationship, you might be in a relationship with somebody who is a saver, but you're the spender, and that can create a lot of conflict in how you're using money in the relationship. And so just being aware of the differences in personalities that you have is super helpful. So with that, I think it's also important not just to see where you stand today, but looking ahead and planning for your future.
Yeah, that's a great point, Amy. And I think with this next slide, we really need to talk about your future, and not only your future, but your partner's future, and if you want to have that future together. So I think it's a good idea to really sit yourself down and individually think of the future you want for yourself: house, having kids, traveling, etc. Because these things are monumental purchases that you might be making, especially kids. That's a lot of cost with them, and having a house is one of the biggest investments that a normal person would usually make. So obviously that has to do with a lot with your money. And these things haven't been consistent with every person. Not everybody wants to have a house. Maybe they want to rent different places around the country or settle down and have kids. Maybe they want to, again, travel the country without kids. Maybe just have dogs or cats, and as well as traveling. So after you've really figured out what you want and what you think is right for you, maybe go and ask your partner, question them what they want in their life. Let them make that decision for themselves as well. And after you guys both, sit down and think for yourselves, regroup and consider whether you're willing to sacrifice a part of your plans to align with their goals, because those goals might not exactly align. So what are you going to do if that happens? And hopefully those goals completely match, and then you guys are free to do what you guys plan to do. But it's definitely going to take some big thinking in all relationships. Every relationship in my family has come with some questions because sometimes they don't always see eye to eye. And that's no different in my relationship that I have currently. And like we're mentioning, having a house is one of the biggest investments you can make. Right before, when me and my girlfriend decided to go to college, obviously another big purchase in someone's life. I'm a native to Las Vegas, so I was comfortable living in Las Vegas with my parents and all our friends, and she thought it'd be a great idea to come to Reno. And I really took a gamble and went with her. Obviously, I took a lot more of a financial risk, having to pay for housing and maybe take on some debt, right? But honestly, it turned out great for me. And I would thank her for making that decision and having myself go along with that, because it really worked out. But that's not to say that all the time it's going to work out. You have to accept the decision that you make, whether it is to sacrifice what you thought was right and go with them, because it was all down to your decision. Not everything's going to be perfect, but you have to take it for what it is and move on with your decision after that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Devin. Yeah, it's definitely can be a lot to think about, right? But at the end of the day, you got to take responsibility for what you decide. So that kind of brings us to our fifth and final tip of the day, which is sharing is caring. So when you think about sharing financial responsibility, it definitely can be caring. But there's sort of a few different approaches that you can take with this. So the first approach is kind of a splitting the bill way to do things, and it's almost the default for a lot of people because it can seem really fair. When you go to a restaurant, you split the bill, get separate checks. It's just kind of like 50-50, right? And this can definitely work for a lot of those short-term things, for maybe some of those smaller purchases. But just know that it doesn't have to be the approach that you take for all of your financial decisions in going into the future. Sometimes it can be better to combine your finances when you're in a serious relationship. Creating things like a joint checking account can be helpful for uh, some of these things. And when you combine finances, it all boils down to what are those shared purchases going to be? It's going to be different for every relationship, but they're usually big ticket things, like we've been mentioning, like a house, maybe it's a mortgage or rent, could be a car. It's going to be different for everyone, but essentially sitting down and deciding what are our shared purchases going to be and what are our individual purchases going to be can be really helpful. And this last point here, understanding that when you combine money to make purchases can be helpful, but at the same time, you have to make sure that everyone still has their own autonomy when they're spending, or making sure that everyone still has their own independence. Like I should be able to spend my money how I want to, my partner should be able to spend their money how they want to. And then having this shared pool, making sure that shared pool goes towards those things that we decide together. One example that I have of sharing is caring and kind of splitting things up is actually in my own personal relationship. So my boyfriend currently has a full-time job and is working as a nurse. And I currently am a college student. I have a part-time income. So just to be very honest, our incomes look very different. And one of our goals together is that we want to get our first apartment together. And right now, rent in the area is looking about like $1,200 a month. And if we're going to do the split the bill method, even 50-50, he'd be paying $600 a month, I'd be paying $600 a month, and that could work. But if you think about it, 600 out of his current income is very manageable, and 600 out of my income is a much different story. It could be most of my paycheck. So, we had to sit down, have a conversation, and think about what works better for us. And we came to the conclusion that maybe instead of a 50-50, at least while I'm working part-time, maybe an 80-20 could work better. And we would only be able to figure that out if we sat down and had this discussion together. So Again, sharing definitely is caring, but you need to figure out what works best for you and your partner.
Yeah, and I love that story, really, and I'm sure sitting down together and starting off that conversation must have been a little hard, just because I mean, us at Nevada Money Mentors, we love talking about money. We don't see money as much of a taboo subject as some might, but I think by and large, talking about money is a little bit of a edgy thing, especially in a relationship. So let's talk about in our next slide how to start those conversations. And the number one thing, or not really number one, but one of the biggest things is being transparent and being objective. Okay, so being transparent is all about not hiding your purchases, no matter if you're ashamed of them or you think that they might be silly. Being transparent is the best way of going about things because numbers don't lie. And if you have a partner who is kind of into looking at the details, they're going to find that out at some point, and then it's going to come out a lot worse on the other side. And being objective, this has to do with one thing, not being judgmental, but looking at things with a level eye, right? I'm not afraid to talk to my girlfriend and say, this purchase was a little bit silly. You didn't need to buy this for our dog. You didn't need to do this, which is a whole nother thing. But I never try to judge her for it by say, look, we have these responsibilities that we need to get done. And then we have, fun money. And you have to be able to dissociate those two things. Um, but always being objective, never looking at things with rose-colored glasses because money doesn't see color, I guess you could say. Then find things that you agree on. Making that bridge between each other. Let's say when we're talking about building a future together, we both want kids, let's say. So that's one thing that you guys could both agree on. Hey, let's do this for our future kids. Let's save up so we could put our kids in college. Making that bridge together could be the starting off point in your relationship, and building from there could be a great foundation. Next, use a tool to assist your thinking. I think that this one is very important because I love to get into the numbers behind things. I love to map things out. So maybe using an Excel spreadsheet, maybe just a pen and pencil or a mind map, or however you and your partner think, that could be extremely helpful, especially in remembering things. And then lastly, make money a judgment-free topic. So just because someone makes or spends money a different way that you do doesn't mean that it's any better or worse, right? You want to make sure that you don't judge them for those purchases, because that really closes the door, that burns the bridge that you guys might have had, and kind of doesn't allow for future growth. So make sure it's a judgment-free topic, and do all the following things, and you might be looking good.
Great, awesome. So those are definitely some fantastic ways on how do you even start to talk about money in your relationships. So to kind of sum things up, I'm going to go into a quick summary with you guys. And if you only remember one thing from this entire presentation, just remember what's on this slide. So, we shared 5 different tips with you today about how to manage your finances in a relationship, but they really all boil down to these 3 principles. You need to understand your financial self. What is your money personality? What are your habits? Things like that. Then from there, how do you understand your partner's financial self? Understand them. What are their habits? What are some of their beliefs? Things like that. And then lastly, how do you put those together? How do you navigate kind of those personality, those habits, and work together, make compromises, and make sure that you're on track to your goals as a couple? And really, the only way to do this is to communicate, right? Communication is key, and this is how you're going to make sure to accomplish all of these things that we talked about today.
Well, and it's funny, Deli, as you get to my age, you realize You're constantly learning new strategies and new things to think about. So I definitely even took some takeaways today and away today. And I can't wait to have my next money date with my husband and we can chat about things. And, some of our decisions now where I stand in my life are a little bit, I think, bigger decisions in terms of larger purchases that we're making. We're thinking about getting another rental property or a cabin somewhere. And so there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into that. So I would love to hear from y'all on the line if you have one thing that you want to take away from today, whether it's just sitting down and starting a budget with your loved one. Maybe it is meeting with a Nevada Money mentor and just saying, I don't really know where to start. So let's hash this out together and build up a roadmap. Just one little thing, if you want to share in the chat box, that would be helpful to us to know that you've learned a thing or two about our presentation today. And we just hope that you'll implement some of these things in your own lives going forward and opening up that conversation. I think sometimes that's the hardest part. And my history comes from my work experience comes from the world of banking. And I have to tell you that when I worked in the banking field, I worked with a lot of couples who were experiencing quite a bit of turmoil in their communications with money. And a lot of it had to do with simply reorganizing bank accounts. And something like that really helped. For example, having a checking account together to pay joint bills, but also still having your own separate accounts for your own free spending money is a great best practice. And if one person's making less than the other, you just contribute a percentage of your pay to help cover for those essential bills that you have together. So just one tip that I know Dahlia kind of alluded to in that presentation about sharing is caring. And it looks like a couple people here just saying Excel is a good way to keep to show kind of your budget and what you're looking at, what's coming in, what's going out. Sitting down, just sitting down. And I remember somebody told me that when I was in my 20s, and it was a supervisor at work basically just said, go grab a beer with your husband, sit down with a little piece of paper and just jot down what's coming into your accounts and what's going out so you have a good picture. And you then, once you know, you can align it with your financial goals. So I love that, just sitting down and kind of having a conversation and chatting about it. And then, focusing on what your priorities are, what their priorities are, and how you can compromise and meet in the middle. It's important, and it can be uncomfortable, especially if you look back at your own upbringing and, maybe money was never talked about in your household. Maybe it was talked about too much. So now you stress about it a little bit more than your partner does. It just, having these conversations and being honest about what you're feeling and what you're experiencing, because usually if you're not in alignment with your goals, you're going to feel a little bit off about where your money is going. You're not going to feel great about what you've been spending money on. And I love too that Julie is saying that she's been trying to keep track of expenses. And Excel sheets are great. And Julie, if you want to reach out to Nevada Money Mentors, we can send you our budget worksheets, or if you want to meet with a financial coach, we'll actually build it up with you. So some great resources. But before you go, just a couple more quick updates for you. First, thank you, Devin and Dahlia, for wonderful tips and resources that's going to really help us talk to our loved ones about money. And if Dee, you can go to the next slide, please. We also understand that this past year has really created extraordinary financial hardships for a lot of families across our nation. And we're feeling it even here in our community, and even just our community at University of Nevada, Reno. And because we want to spread the love, right? We encourage all students to check out. This is a new mobile app that was just released for students on campus. It's free, and it can assist you with some local resources to help you with more of the essential needs. One of the benefits of this program, we like to call it's a Yelp for emergency services. So for example, you are in need of food right now, you can go to this app and it directs you to resources locally that can connect you to some help for food. So if you're looking for housing, additional resources, you can upload the app and then be connected to those right tools. So you might want to check that out. And then next, just keep in touch with us. we're hoping that you can follow us on our social media channels, hear about some upcoming events that we have. We also will be posting, as I mentioned earlier, this presentation on our YouTube channel. We do have some other presentations already out there. So if you're just kind of studying at your desk and you want to learn some more tips, you can just play us on there and gain some more information. And if for those of you, as we mentioned before, if you are interested in meeting with us one-on-one for financial coaching, you can schedule an appointment with us directly from our website. And you get to meet with a peer financial coach or myself, and we will just kind of talk to you about where you're at with your money. And really our goal is to help you get better and more confident in the way that you manage it. And the last thing, or I think we might have just a couple more slides here. The next one is our next events. Cryptocurrency, kind of a buzzword lately, mostly recently, right? And we just wanted to share with you some more information about it. If you're curious as to what it is, join us on Wednesday, February 24th. And then for more of a deep clean, a deep look at your finances, instead of looking at it as a New Year's resolution, we figured, coming in March will be almost 1 year where we went on a national, almost a national lockdown, right? We wanted to just make sure you refresh your finances for this upcoming year, and you can join us on Tuesday, March 2nd for that.